So stuck on the res has a little bit different connotation than it did back in my days. I'm 72 years old, and I think there's more opportunities today than there was back in the 50s and the 60s.
How I see it affecting others and my peers is that I've been raised with, grandmas and grandpas and uncles and aunties that I went to boarding school, seen how they were, and seen how many different families are and in the same capacity dealing with trauma, that new issues are created. Poverty, abuse, multiple areas of abuse. And I've had friends and family who had to go through those struggles. And I've seen some rise above, and I've seen some go to the side, go down the wrong path. And so that's been kind of difficult, but just understanding what's going on and what I could do for myself was important to me.
Well, I'll give you a first-hand experience with generational trauma. Growing up, my dad, he went to boarding school, and he would tell me stories about Grandpa. Grandpa went to Carlisle Indian School out in Pennsylvania. Carlisle is ex-military base, turned into a boarding school for American Indians. And he ran away from there because back then, the punishment for any infractions, they actually had a dungeon in the basement where they would put students. And that's where Grandpa went. And he told his son, my dad, about his experience out there, and he ran away and went back to the reservation. And then my dad, when he was at Plainview, South Dakota boarding school, high school, Grandpa died then in 1946, and they would not let my dad go home to attend Grandpa's funeral, so he ran away.
And I'll share a quick story with you. My uncle, at 8 years old, ran away from a boarding school in South Dakota, and he ran across 2 states. And when he got to the border of our reservation, the Mountie was there, the police officer, and they beat him and they brought him back to that boarding school where my uncle was sexually abused over and over and over again by farmers, where those people from that school, that boarding school, would send my relatives, my uncles and my aunties, into those farm homes where those farmers would sexually abuse my uncle and my aunties. So that's where blood trauma comes from. That's what generational trauma is. And I think it's passed down through people's birth. Because I think that when my mother, who was abused, who was also in a boarding school, the way she disciplined us and the way she abused us and the way she spanked us, it was a learned thing. It was part of blood trauma because it was also happened to her dad and her mom and her grandpa.
It carried on to my childhood and the way they raised me because they were growing up with that chip on their shoulder from that trauma. And a lot of that trauma was based from racism. But I myself, and I see it in my sisters got a slight chip on their shoulder as far as how people look at them, as far as them being Native American in a white environment. I chose not to be like that and look at the better side of it.
I believe it does. I believe it does affect our people yet today. Some of our parents are still using, and kids see that, and they hear about it, and I know it affects them. That too is called, that's intergeneration, from one generation to another being affected. Kids learn by what they see, mostly by what they see, and to a certain extent by what they hear.
Poverty, alcoholism. For example, my mother is an alcoholic, and it affected her majorly, affected our family majorly. I feel like none of us can continue a day without drinking alcohol.
And I believe that through our traditional ways and our ceremonies, like I was telling you, 50, 60 years ago, we couldn't practice our traditional ways and our ceremonies. We couldn't bring our children into the sweat lodge or our kids because we weren't allowed to practice religion. We weren't allowed to go to the grocery stores. We weren't allowed to buy groceries. And if we did buy groceries, they were given to us by the government. And it was really, really bad food. And that's another form of trauma because it shows in the way we eat, the way we lived in our environment, and what was projected to us, which was alcohol.
I feel like it'll get better. I feel like the young generation could possibly, break the cycle or change it. I have no idea.
So allow me to digress because it also means that there's healing. So to me, when we start to heal is when we start to identify who we are. And that was always the biggest part of healing with trauma, and how we identified ourselves and how to start our work.
Trauma doesn't make you. Trauma is a way that happened to you, and it can make you a very strong person. It can make you actionary, and it's called forgiveness. And a lot of people don't know how to forgive. So with generational trauma, you have to be you have to listen, you have to have commitment, right? You have to have trust, and you have to have zalgin, love. Those are the 4 main ingredients when you help people heal from trauma. And it's the most beautiful gift you can do is light a fire and sit with a young person while they drop that trauma. That doesn't define us. But what it does is it makes us better and stronger. And it makes us help your generation to not be stuck in that. So miigwechimyu, thank you. I'm glad I was here today to do your interview, and I hope I answered all your questions.